This conversation is powered by Google Illuminate. Check out illuminate.google.com for more. So we're diving into a pretty fascinating theological debate today. How could there be light before the sun, as Genesis suggests? It's a head scratcher, right?
It's a question that's puzzled scholars for centuries, yeah? The traditional interpretation often has trouble, reconciling the literal creation account with what science tells us.
Exactly. But what if we considered a different time frame? What if those days weren't like 24-hour periods? Just a thought.
That's where the idea of God days comes in, vast epochs of time. This allows for a more nuanced interpretation, I think.
Right, and it opens up the possibility of a pre-Adamite world, a previous age before humanity. So these God days in Genesis 1, they represent immense stretches of time, right? Thousands, maybe even millions of years.
Precisely. This allows for geological processes to unfold, for the Earth to form and develop over eons before the creation of Adam and Eve.
And this fits with the idea of a pre-Adamite world, a previous creation that existed before humanity.
Yeah, some think there was a previous creation that was destroyed maybe by some cataclysmic event before God's work of creation, as described in Genesis 1.
This pre-Adamite world could explain the presence of light before the sun's creation, as described in Genesis 1, 3, 4, right? The light could have been from other celestial bodies, or maybe a different atmospheric condition. Interesting, huh?
Exactly. The text doesn't say the sun was the only source of light. It just says, let there be light. And there was. Simple as that.
The text also mentions a 1,000-year day, doesn't it? How does that fit in?
The idea of a 1,000-year day, based on 2 Peter 3:8, suggests God's perspective on time is way different from ours. A day for God could be millennia.
So the 6 days of creation could represent 6 vast periods of cosmic and geological development, culminating in the creation of humanity.
Precisely. This interpretation fits with scientific findings about the age of the Earth and the universe.
It also allows for a more literal interpretation of the war in heaven mentioned in other scriptures, a literal war that could have lasted for millennia. Wow.
Absolutely. The war in heaven, the conflict between God and Lucifer, could have been a long, drawn-out cosmic struggle, spanning immense periods of time.
This approach seems to bridge the gap between a literal reading of scripture and scientific understanding of the Earth's age.
It offers a way to understand the creation account that doesn't mean we have to reject scientific evidence. It's about interpreting the text in its context.
It's about understanding the metaphorical language used in scripture and realizing the Bible isn't a science textbook.
Exactly. The Bible uses poetic and symbolic language to convey spiritual truths. We shouldn't force a literal interpretation when a metaphorical one is more appropriate.
This approach allows for a more holistic understanding of the creation narrative, one that integrates faith and reason. This interpretation also highlights the spiritual war, the ongoing conflict between good and evil.
The 7 days of creation could be seen as a symbolic representation of this spiritual war, a cosmic battle between God and Lucifer.
The creation of light on the first day could symbolize the triumph of good over evil, the victory of truth over falsehood.
The subsequent days of creation could represent the ongoing struggle, the gradual unfolding of God's plan to restore order and harmony to the universe.
And the seventh day, the day of rest, symbolizes the ultimate victory of good, the final triumph of God's kingdom.
Precisely. It's a powerful metaphor for the ongoing spiritual battle and the ultimate hope of redemption.
Some might criticize this interpretation as being too allegorical, too far removed from a literal reading of the text.
It's true that this interpretation requires a shift in perspective, a willingness to move beyond a purely literal reading.
But isn't that a necessary step for a deeper understanding of Scripture? Isn't it important to consider the context and the intended meaning?
Absolutely. We need to approach Scripture with humility and a willingness to learn, to consider different perspectives and interpretations.
And this interpretation offers a compelling alternative to the traditional, more literal readings. This discussion has only scratched the surface of this complex topic. There's so much more to explore.
Indeed. The relationship between Scripture and science, the nature of time and creation, these are all profound questions that deserve further investigation.
We could delve deeper into the specific verses, examining the Hebrew and Greek text for a more nuanced understanding.
And we could explore the different theological perspectives on creation, comparing and contrasting various interpretations.
This is a topic that will continue to fascinate and challenge us for years to come. The importance of understanding the context of Genesis 1 cannot be overstated.
The ancient Near Eastern context, The literary genre and the theological purpose of the text all need to be considered.
A literal interpretation, divorced from its historical and literary context, can lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations.
Precisely. We need to read the text within its proper context to understand its true meaning.
And that context suggests a more nuanced understanding of the creation narrative, one that harmonizes faith and reason. The use of metaphor and symbolism in Genesis 1 is crucial to understanding its message.
The days are not necessarily literal 24-hour periods, but rather symbolic representations of vast epochs of time.
The creation of light on the first day could be a metaphor for the dawn of creation, the beginning of God's work.
And the subsequent days could represent the unfolding of God's plan, the gradual development of the universe and humanity.
This metaphorical interpretation allows for a more comprehensive understanding of the creation narrative. This approach fosters a more holistic understanding of the Bible, integrating faith and reason.
It allows us to appreciate the richness and depth of Scripture without sacrificing scientific understanding.
That was a great discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights. I really appreciate it.